All right, here we are. So how are you tonight?
Well, I'm very well. How about you?
Yeah,
Haven't seen you for a long time.
yeah, I know, right? We haven't spoken for so long.
Live in the same house, but that's beside the point. Just coerce on social media, don't we? Really?
Yeah, we're living online, so you may as well make it all like a simulation. Everyone here is pretty much like living online, so we might as well join that gang.
Yeah, pretty much, eh?
Yeah, exactly. I don't see why not. So how's everyone else doing tonight? Just type one word to describe how you're feeling for 2023. I know for me, I'm feeling quite pumped about the new year, for what 2023 holds for myself personally, and also for just everything in general, like the opportunities that will come up. Um, Happy New Year to everyone who we haven't heard us since last year. We've done a few things for members and also the economy update last night as well. So happy New Year to everyone this is your first training for the year. We've got a few comments coming through for how you're feeling for the new year. Real great, pumped, positive, encouraged, excited, quiet, anticipation, opportunistic, yippee. That's one way to describe it. So yeah, Warren, how are you feeling for 2023? One word to describe it.
Inspired.
Yeah, inspired. So we've got our first relatively challenging way to describe it. Everyone else seems to be quite positive about this year, which is actually a good sign in my opinion, that a lot of people are excited for it. So is there actually anyone here that's more nervous than anything, just out of curiosity, or is everyone actually quite positive overall? Do we have anyone here that's more like feeling nervous or a bit unsure or uncertain, anything like that? Just out of curiosity. Because I think overall it seems like a lot of people are feeling quite good. Yeah, we've got one person I'm a bit unsure. I mean, I'm sure there'll be plenty of things transpire this year, and there'll be certain things that will be unpredictable. But overall, I think if you're prepared for it, then you'll be able to navigate through it quite well. So quite positive. So yeah, looks like everyone's in a good spirit, which is good to see. Connor's also co-host here because he's going to be jumping in on certain parts. So how are you going tonight, Connor?
Caught me off guard there a little bit, but yeah, I'm going good, Ed. I'm going it. It's been a while since me and yourself and Warren have been on a webinar together, so I'm excited to bring in the new year with a bit of a bang.
Yeah, no, right. It's been quite a while, hey.
Definitely, mate. Definitely.
No, but you've got to get like some change up every now and then. I mean, we'll do events together and all that, but actually doing online, like I was saying before, about making it virtual. This is our first one in quite some time.
Yeah, it actually does feel a bit weird being back on and doing something like with the three of us again. But yeah, like I said, I'm excited for it. So
Yeah, no, right. Usually it's just investment meetings, isn't it?
yeah, pretty much. And
But
usually
then,
there's coffee as well, but it's a bit late for that.
yeah, I know, right. But then here we are, got some people listening to us and just listening to our debate. I mean, we could banter all day and all that, but for the sake of the topic we have tonight, we'll keep it on point. So, um, what we'll do now is we'll get on anyway, and I'll get you involved on certain parts, Connor. So it's more around the financial areas, because what we're wanting tonight to be about is more predictions, because I'm sure everyone here is interested to hear, especially your take, Warren, on your predictions for 2023, and also a bit of research that we've done of what could happen this year, because obviously the best preparation that you can do is when you're preparing for something before it actually happens, rather than having to react to a situation. It's always better to see what's coming and then be able to prepare for accordingly. So what we'll do to get started with, before we actually go into predictions around the financial markets, around energy, and around a lot of different sectors and areas, is first recap 2022. So from your perspective, Warren, where did you see the world going from 2022? And if you had to give a bit of a recap for that, for what the world saw and what Australia saw, how would you summarize 2022 overall?
Look, 2022 in a way was a kind of aftermath of a couple of ugly years. I think people were still reeling from everything that happened. You know, the absolute craziness that was going on with the governments just pretty much losing their cotton friggin' minds, and just basically doing ridiculously crazy stuff. And just, yeah, look, We saw the whole COVID thing happen. We saw, governments basically doing whatever they wanted and pretty much, locking people down, taking their rights. And the reality was they did what they did with the vaccine and they got away with it, That's pretty much what happened. So the way I see 2023 is I think certain realities are hitting people, interest rates going up. To me, it's like the preparation, like for a fairly major kind of what I call collapse, as I would put it, resets, preparing for, what I see as a really dark economic winter ahead. That's what I see. Like we're definitely heading for this dark economic winter ahead. And really 2022 confirmed that well and truly, that basically the result of the COVID lockdowns and the mandates, you got a lot of people who got vaccines and didn't want. You have a lot of people still very angry and a bit traumatized. You've got prices that have changed and things like that. So the overall 2022 travel got back going again, but everyone realized the world is no longer the world that once was. And everyone has this looming sense of dread in a way as to what's coming next. That's the overall masses. Not really sure what this all means, what a recession means, because most people have never experienced a recession before. I have. And because of that, I love recessions because they lean things out and give you an opportunity to get into markets and opportunities that you can't get into in booms. So that's how I see recessions. I love them. But for the majority of people who've never been in them, it's scary because I can see we're entering a recession. There's no doubt that we are. And it's just 2022 saw cryptos drop extensively, whereas everyone was convinced cryptos were the way for everyone to be the next Warren Buffett. We saw property, craziness happened in 2020 and 21, set back a little bit. Overall, it's just been very crazy, very volatile, very chaotic, people traveling, but just overall, there's just a sense of nervousness and dread. But for those who have been educated, I think people there's that sense of excitement. And that's why a lot of you on here are probably like seeing great opportunities ahead. What do you think, Connor and Ed?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. 2022 was interesting overall. Like what you said, it kind of gives governments an idea of what they can do to people, and you realize even for, you were talking about it pretty much the whole of last year, and it gave everyone here a good indication of where society as a whole is at and how much people can get away with and how much people will actually do what they're told. So
they got away with it. Basically, what Pete said was a lot of people are trying, to deny it and this, and they'll be brought to Nuremberg, and they got away with it. That's just the reality. They did get away with it. And there may be some accountability, but by and large, they got away with it. That's how I see it. And people are in shock.
Yeah, and then what you saw with obviously things playing out in the world, like there were plenty of situations that happened last year that also influenced the markets, like especially for investors, that whenever you've got a lot of things happening around the world and a lot of changes and government overreach, it's obviously going to have an impact on the market. So that's what you saw, and there's a lot of volatility happening around and a lot of downturns and stuff like that. So you've really got to know what you're doing when it comes to areas like that. Did you have any thoughts on that, Connor?
Yeah, I think Warren hit it on the head where we're really just starting to pay for a lot of the stuff that happened during that COVID period now. Obviously, we were bailed out pretty big by governments back then with stimulus packages and whatnot. And unfortunately, last year, we started to see the repercussions of kind of so much money being free and the interest rates having to rise to kind of stop inflation. So it's been a pretty ugly year with all the mandates and obviously like the Russia-Ukraine situation. But then for anyone here that's across multiple asset classes, even things like stocks and bonds usually move opposite to each other, but both of them were simultaneously down. I actually saw something that was 2022 was actually the worst combined year for stocks and bonds together that they've had in kind of the free market. So it's been just kind of a real ugly year all around. So it's going to be interesting to see how 2023 follows last year.
Yeah, and usually when it comes to entrees, I generally prefer food, but I guess we just had an entree. And 2023 or 24 is going to be the main course. So it'll be interesting to see what happens out of that. Because if governments can get away with mandating people and then forcing things into people's bodies and all that, it's going to be frightening what they can do when it comes to people's money and their livelihood. I think everyone has that feeling. You've got that feeling something's brewing.
Well, the book of the Sovereign Individual by Rees, Moggs and Davidson, and I remember Stephen Pettit and I, around 2015, 16, 17, did a series of webinars for clients And we said this back then, but if you actually go and read The Sovereign Individual by Rees, Moggs and Davidson on what they said that if you go back and study the collapse of any civilization, the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, Argentina, what happens is that generally it's a few things that happened. Number one, generally it's a very prosperous society, number one. Number two, people become very complacent and used to this and think the good times will last forever. Moral order in the right thing by each other is by and large broken down across government, across citizens. So moral order and moral law is broken down. And it says that by and large, that people are becoming dependent on some centralized governments and people doing stuff for them. And then that starts to break down completely. And when that breaks down completely, the rich start moving their money out before anyone else. Then others start to realize what's going on. Many choose to stay in that society and hope. And in the meantime, governments then just start taking people's money because they can't fund and they don't want to give up their way of life. The politicians want to continue to get high pensions. They want to get lifetime paying from the people. They want to continue to sit in offices and make laws and do nothing because that's what most of them do. They don't really do an awful lot apart from sit there and tell people trying to do stuff what not to do. And eventually you can't keep having a society, like you can't keep having a business where people where nearly all the money from a few individuals is paying for a whole lot of staff who don't do much. And likewise, this is the problem with the Western world. So they predicted in 1995 that you would see a collapse and eventually governments would just blatantly take people's money. And they said, if you're a sovereign individual, though, they said you'll be ready for it and you'll be good. And I said this in my last webinar to a lot of our high net worth clients in a VIP webinar. I said to them, you got to understand that for a sovereign individual, these times are the greatest times in history. You'll never get a better chance to get wealthy, to prosper. For the non-sovereign individual, it's a seriously scary, frightening, shitty time. And someone asked me, what's it like living in West Australia in Mark McGowan's sort of emperor country? And I said, well, if you're not sovereign, it would be terrible but if you're sovereign, WA is the best place to live in. And those who live in WA would probably nod their heads. It's a big country, a big state. People get left alone who are kind of outside the system. They don't really tax very heavily. We've got good energy. We've got good resource, plenty of farmland. It's a great place to live for a sovereign individual. I mean, it really is. And so sovereignty opens up doors and choices for you that you don't get otherwise in empowerment. And yeah, look, generally when people are disempowered, that's when they get into a lot of trouble, because they feel that others have power over them. So sovereignty really is about you finding your power so no one has power over you. That's what it's all about. And I think that this decade is all about choosing who's going to step up and become sovereign and become empowered. Those who do, it's going to be great times. Those who don't, it's going to get pretty bad. Just like the Industrial Revolution, just like all the times in history of massive upheaval.
Well, yeah, that's a good take. And what about, before we move to predictions, I'm also interested to get your, a few things from you on this, but also everyone listening, feel free to type in the chat your biggest learnings as well as Lauren speaks and all that. But from 2022, from everything that happened, did you have any key learnings that you actually took away last year that you're going to apply moving forward? And like I said, if anyone else had some big learnings last year, feel free to put it in the chat as we talk.
Are you asking me or Connor or both of us?
Well, you first, and then Connor can jump in afterwards.
Okay. Well, yeah, look, basically, some of my illusions were shattered last year. One of my illusions was, the one thing I wasn't deluded about, I said all along that they would get away with it. And I had just about every one of my friends who regarded themselves as awake saying Australians and US pushed back. I said, you're going to get away with it. And I said, I hope I'm wrong and you're right, but you're going to get away with it. So I wasn't deluded. I sort of stated where we're at. I knew we were in trouble. I knew our moral fibre had broken down. Our churches were not doing anything. And generally, a state of a church or a society has a lot to do with where it's at. If you've got a healthy religious system, it's good because that gives people some stability and community. When you don't, it gets really bad. And the churches are just dreadful right now. I think everyone would agree on that. So I knew that. The one thing that I did think was after the aftermath would happen, that it would bring a very big awakening very quickly. And I realized that didn't actually happen. And people say, well, there was an awakening. Look, there's no doubt people are more aware. I think we have seen a level of awakening. But for me, it was just actually realizing some of the realities of humanity and how we go through cycles and how, in a way, I'd spent my whole life trying to rescue the world, and I realized I couldn't. And just thought all I can really do is do my path and help those who want to get helped. And that was my big learning for me, was just actually learning just to get on with what I can do and not live in a fantasy and help people. So that's why I fell more in love with the Global Wealth Club, because I thought this is where we practically actually are able to help people. I mean, we were getting some great messages. You know, I was dealing with the death of my partner, as many of you know, which was quite traumatic for me. And at the same time, so I learned a lot about dealing with things and being realistic and being grounded. And I thought, what we can do is empower people, build a good community, and just get on with our job and take the opportunities as they come up. And I also saw the wisdom of balanced portfolio. I saw how being wise of our portfolios had saved our asses when cryptos collapsed last year, you know, things like that. So look, I learned a lot last year just about balance and setting realistic expectations while still stepping up and being, as I call it, exceptional in what you do, but just persistency, showing up and just sticking at it. So, and just the fact is governments get away with a lot, and they're still going to get away with a lot more worse stuff for a little while to come. That was my reality. And all we can really do is not try and, you know, cry and change what we can't change, but just keep doing what we're doing and keep bringing changes in small levels and bit by bit. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I hit. The biggest thing was I was glad I spent so much time empowering people, and we also got to do more of it.
Yeah, definitely. And how about you, Connor? Did you have any big learnings from last year?
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest learning was that the things you probably don't expect to happen can always happen. Because to be completely honest with you, even though obviously I stepped away from my job doing PT because I knew didn't know the mandates were coming, but I thought there would be a chance that it would actually happen. To be honest, I didn't really expect that they would follow through and people would be mandated and you'd be kicked out of your job if you didn't get vaccinated. But obviously, I'm glad I took the steps I needed to, even though I wasn't 100% sure that was going to happen. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson I'm going to remember for this year, because we talk about things like a financial collapse, and it's quite hard to comprehend, specifically for someone like me being, you know, a bit younger and not going through multiple recessions like someone like Warren has. But yeah, ultimately, you just need to be prepared for anything, because even if you don't think it can happen, that's generally when you get caught off guard. So I'm definitely keeping an open mind this year, specifically with, you know, larger economic downturns. We've seen it pretty bad for 2022, but we really could just be at the start of something much worse right now. So that's the biggest learning for me, and something I'm keeping in mind moving forward this year and next year.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like, for me, one thing that really sunk in last year was making sure you prepare for things before they happen, because imagine how much better off people would have been if they anticipated or listened to the right people and actually took action rather than sort of like a Netflix show, as you say, Warren. Like, most people will listen to predictions from guys like Stainsby, Robert Kiyosaki, Donald Trump, who know what's happening, and they'll kind of be like, oh, that's pretty interesting, and take it like a Netflix show. But actually putting it into action is a whole different story that you've got to start doing. If that was the key learning that I took from last year. Yeah,
look, something else, I want to mention a couple of other things. A couple of spiritual quotes I can think of. One is from the Bible and one is from Buddha. The one from the Bible, it says in Proverbs, a book that was written by what many say was the wisest king who ever lived. And the Freemasons built a whole movement after him, as did many others, like the Templars and even a few, you know, other groups. King Solomon, the Great. And he says, a wise man or woman sees evil and hides himself. In other words, they see the problems when everyone else isn't, and they hide themselves. The foolish go on and are punished. That's the first thing. And the other one that Buddha said was that suffering only happens when we see the world in the way we believe, when we have a fantasy about the world and which we're attached to, and then that fantasy doesn't transpire. Whereas the wise man or woman is not attached really to gain or loss. And this is something I went to a great, seminar with Dean Martini and Philippa Bond, who are great corporate business coaches. And they taught the secret to building billion-dollar companies is where you're not attached to gain or loss. So it's strange as it sounds, because when you're having losses, you can see it. Like Uber is huge now, but Uber suffered losses for many, many years because they saw the losses as a thing for now until they built brand. Many companies have done that kind of stuff. So the biggest thing for me last year, I think for many, was we created a fantasy view of the world. And one of the reasons I found it relatively easier, there's probably two things I didn't see coming, one in a big way, one in a minor way. One of the big way was I never saw my 28-year-old partner dying. You know, I had all kinds of things. She was dealing with stuff in her life, but the last thing I expected was to find her dead in the toilet when I'd never really seen someone close to me dead. And that literally derailed me for quite a while. And that was because I didn't see that coming. You know, I wasn't able to properly, attach and see the benefits. It took a while. Now I do. I see all that kind of stuff. The other thing too was, I had a certain fantasy as to what would happen after everything happened, rather than seeing it for what it really was. So the lesson to learn is that the wise man or woman will see evil and hide themselves, which means if you see evil ahead, and evil can mean a recession, can mean governments taking more money, which I don't have the slightest doubt if you give them the chance, they're going to do it. I mean, they now know they can coercively put vaccines into people and get away with it. So I'm sure they've got some nice juicy planned. And then, so there's that one. And if you can see that markets are going to be volatile, and considering what's going on and interest rates going up, there's a very good chance that will happen. And if you create a realistic view of the world. So for me, my realistic view of the world is, look, I expect to see some challenges. I expect to see some challenges in our country. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I can create my life and life of my clients to where we focus on what we can work on and make our life better. Like I'm doing dancing, as some of you know now, like pole dancing, and I'm doing a bit of break dancing and all kinds of crazy stuff. Because one of my bucket list goals was, hey, the one thing that the death of my partner changed my life was I saw how transient life was, and thought I could be worrying myself about what's coming, and then just like that, I die. I mean, who gives a shit, man? So I thought I may as well live my life really, really well and still be wise. So I thought, what's on my bucket list? I thought, well, I always wanted to break dance like Michael Jackson. So I thought I'll go and do some dance lessons. So I did. And then that led to one thing to another. Next minute, I'm doing pole dancing classes, and next minute, I'm doing shows. And I've got my big show on the 25th of March. And then I went back to a dream I had when I was younger, where I'd get involved in music and things like that. So I'm seeing it as a great chance to get out there, have some fun, explore some dreams. At the same time, it's helped me become a lot more unattached to what happens. I've realized that money is illusory. I'm enjoying it. I love making money, but it's illusory, It's like a Monopoly game. At some stage, it will reset. It will all start again, whether it happens when our life ends, whether a government just one day decides to take it all away. If it happens, it happens. I do everything in my power to minimize that and mitigate that risk. And I'm very confident that what I've done will do that. But at the end of the day, no one really knows, do they? And I think the more you can become unattached and empower yourself as much as you can, you're prepared for whatever comes your way. And that's one of the things I've learned from great business mentors who've had great results. They really are prepared for whatever comes their way. And one of the most inspiring speeches I've ever heard was by Sir Richard Branson. I remember a lot of people criticized him for the speech, but we were there at a business convention of a number of people where we'd all paid to go. And Richard Branson, when he was asked about his greatest tips for people in business, he said, just actually realize it all ends at some stage, enjoy what you enjoy doing, and live and do what you're passionate about, and find a way to make it profitable. Because he said, at the end of the day, if you don't enjoy your life, what's it all worth anyway? Who cares if you got 10 million if you hate your life and don't have good health and don't like the people you're with? He said, you're better off to do what you love doing. He said, and if it means for a time that you're living more simply, and he shared his own story. He said, for 15 years of my life, I was more in debt than I was making money. But he said, I was enjoying my life. And then he said, I kept building and kept doing what I loved doing, made sure that, more money was coming in, and I was borrowing like crazy. I always had no doubt I'd make it work. And then I got my break. The Virgin got launched publicly, and I made $500 million in one day. And that got me started. He said, as a matter of fact, I'm shaking my head, but I loved his approach to life. The guy had the best philosophy of life I've ever heard. He was just so chill, like so relaxed, and just a happy guy. He struck me as a very happy individual. That's what I liked about him.
Yeah, I mean, but even doing more of what you enjoy doing and what you love, would you say that you've noticed changes in terms of seeing more money come in for you personally, and even in your own journey to be sovereign? Have you actually noticed those kind of fast track that?
That's the funny thing. Since I've been serving people more, I do more time doing free webinars like this and others in philanthropy than I do paid work now, and I'm making more money. It's just, and I think you look at someone like Musk and the amount of stuff he does, and some of the best, the world's elite, and they do a lot. I mean, Musk bought Twitter purely to bring back freedom of speech. I don't think he gives a rat's ass how much money he makes from that. You can see that. he did Tesla because he wants to bring electric cars to the world, you know. And so for me, I've noticed that money's come easier because I think people appreciate what you're doing. I'm convinced some clients just sign up and buy products. They just want to give back to us for what we're giving, because I've had clients say that to us. So I was fortunate in growing up in a missionary uncle and aunt who became very wealthy living by that mindset. And my uncle just always said, you know, God, you can never outgive God, Warren. And he said, you know, he said, and there's always plenty more where that came from. He said, whenever you have a money challenge, always just say to yourself, there's plenty more where that came from. And I've never forgot his advice. And I always say, there's plenty more when I came. And when I started doing more philanthropy, I'd say to myself, there's plenty more. There's always going to be money my way. I'll never have a problem. And then someone will come and I'll make a whole lot of money on the investment I didn't see coming, or I'll have a flood of clients that I didn't expect. And it's amazing how it works. And that's why I'm fortunate enough to walk through that. And I've learned that, you know, however you see God, source, the universal light, the way the world works, you just get looked after when you enjoy what you're doing. And without being head in the clouds, as you know, I work my ass off. For me, I just keep serving and getting out and doing what I love doing and empowering as many people as I can. And this common law course that we're going to mention later on, I'm very excited about that because I really want to empower people in their lawful rights in business and harassment and bullying and all that, because I think it's going to be critical in being sovereign and getting through this winter, because as financially the shit hits the fan, governments are going to no doubt start to bring in all kinds of possibly climate change lockdowns or whatever else they want to do. And it's very important, as well as having our finances protected, you've got to have an inner empowerment and know your rights. That's my other thing as well.
Yeah, for sure. So stay tuned to the end. I think that we've been getting a lot of feedback and requests for this. So we finally put something together and all of you guys will enjoy listening to it. So we'll move on to the next topic anyway, just to keep on time and all that. But yeah, as a final comment on that topic, just if you guys, I mean, we don't really set New Year's resolutions specifically, but we do always like to have an outline of what we want to achieve for the year. And I'm sure most people are like that. So if you guys are struggling to do more of what you enjoy doing, that could possibly be a good challenge that you give for yourself for 2023 is find a hobby or find something that you genuinely enjoy doing and start doing more of it, and just notice the changes in your state of mind and notice if it makes any changes to your income and your ability to prepare and become sovereign. I know I've seen the changes in you, Warren, as I'm sure you can testify to that, Connor. So both Connor and I are starting to do more of what we enjoy, like in our own hobbies and all that. That's a challenge we've set for ourselves. So I would really encourage a lot of people here to go out and find something you enjoy and start doing it, because I think you'll notice the changes. So the next topic that we'll move into, which I think everyone's here for, is your predictions, because 2022 obviously presented a lot of challenges in itself, and 2023 I can't imagine is going to get any easier. I mean, I don't think we're quite on the main meal yet. I think you can agree to that. We're probably more like on the second entree or something like that. So everyone here is really interested to hear your take for 2023, because the sooner that you get an idea of what to prepare for, then the better. So for this year, what kind of challenges can you see people facing, and what would you be nervous about?
The good thing is to do that. You don't need a crystal ball. I mean, even though it'd be nice if I could, you know, put on my special magic glasses and just go, I could do that. Or else, like, and you know, it might work and it sounds good. Maybe I'll pretend that I just did do that. But the other option is you actually look at past experience and you look at what people do in their behavioral patterns. And I'm sure you would notice, generally, if you meet someone that you think's really cool, and then you find out that their last two partners, they hate them and they think they're idiots and they insult them all the time, you know that on the balance of probabilities, you'll be the next person they do that with if you start dating them, because people, unless you actively deal with something, they do that. That's why stock traders who follow charts and algorithms do very well. Casinos make a fortune because they work out precise calculations of, you know, in advance as to the likelihood of certain things, and they work on the averages and they make their money from that. There's companies in California that do divorce insurance against family court, and they can predict with about 97 or 98% accuracy if a marriage will last and about how long. And they just use algorithms, they use compatibility assessing, everything. So predictive behavior is easier than you think it is. It's just looking at things. So the closest things we've got to compare this with is like the Great Depression and probably the early 1970s with the gold standard being removed from currencies. And both those situations, you didn't just magically work up one day and the world fell apart and blew up. Now, it doesn't mean that you may not have a once-in-a-lifetime meteorite Armageddon kind of incident, but over a period of time, in the same way that the boom built up gradually over the last 30, 40 years, recessions creep in and get worse and worse until one day you wake up. It's a bit like when people get health conditions, chiropractors tell you that you don't just suddenly wake up and your back's fucked, or your neck. It's normally a build-up. Pain is the last sign, and kind of you'd know as a former personal trainer, it's the last sign that you got a big problem you've been ignoring in your mechanical structure. And Connor used to be my personal trainer, scarily enough. And I remember I started having a lot of shoulder problems. And no matter what I did, I was getting a lot of pain in my shoulder. And in the end, what Connor and I worked out was that it was to do with my biomechanical movement. And I was over pushing heavier weights and I was still using an incorrect pattern. So I had to break everything down and go back to basics. So I was going to end up having a major shoulder problem. So likewise, society, we've been living on a debt-based currency. We've been printing money to kind of solve problems. We've been increasing interest rates from manipulation and things like that. The average person can't buy a house anymore. Crime and moral kind of, basically like people coercing each other into vaccines, it's at a pretty all-time low. Well, not all-time, but a low time for recent times. And you've got, on top of that, you got, as Bill Bonner says, the two runaway freight trains that are actually heading our way at the moment. And in fact, Bill Bonner in his particular thing, he actually says this. So I'm just quickly going to share these slides for a couple of seconds. But Bill Bonner, he said exactly what Stephen and I have been saying for quite a while. You've got two runaway freight trains that are basically heading each other's way, which he said when these kind of things happen, you've got a big, big problem. And this guy hasn't been wrong in any of his major predictions in what he said. And he went back to the Great Depression. And keep in mind, the Great Depression gradually came in over 4 years. 1929 was the first collapse, but the smart ones are already getting out in the 1929 as interest rates had soared up. Prices were just over speculative and the market started dropping. By 1933, America was in real trouble and they reset the currency. So the two runaway freight trains is to try this net zero, where they're basically what they're doing in simple terms, to say, hey, let's get rid of fossil fuels, let's get rid of coal, let's get rid of all that and just get all renewable energy. Lovely idea in principle. I'm very green, as many of you know. In reality, it's going to take a long 50-year transition, 30 to 50 years to get this to this level. And you need fossil fuels at the moment, but just to gradually reduce the reliance and start, like we have solar power at our house and things like that. And, that saves me electricity, but sometimes we need to kind of rely on the fossil fuels. So you've got this insane push in America and Europe and other places to do that. And already they're starting to get rolling blackouts in some places. Bonner predicts you're going to actually see electricity blackout for days, like not just a day, but for days, even weeks in certain places, and people will die from all kinds of stuff. And on top of that, you've got the soaring inflation in America and the price rising everywhere for essential cost of living because the government's printing money, interest rates soaring up, cost of borrowing, people start increasing their stuff to try and pay their taxes. The ATO are chasing their money again after giving a holiday during COVID. It does heading for some fairly major challenges. So I see that over time, and I'm not saying all this will happen this year, but you're going to start seeing things collapse and fail. Markets will drop. Certain things will drop quite badly. I do think we'll see some market drops this year in some things. Over time, government will take everyone's money in certain classes over time. I'm not saying it'll happen this year. In fact, if anything, I think probably not this year, but they'll just be doing it in bits and pieces and things like that. I have no doubt we're heading, because generally, if you keep getting the currency out of control and printing money, eventually 100% of the time, they have to reset the currency and start the game on again. Now, how that will look, whether that's a new digital dollar, dollar for dollar, which they rechange the currency, I don't know. It may not end up being as bad as people think. If you've got a smart government, they may just do it, and the worst that will happen is certain loans will be forgiven. Really, that scenario, they'll wipe the whole thing out and kind of start again, and everyone's all in the same boat. I'm not so sure it'll be that severe in Australia, but I might be wrong. I think more likely than not, they'll just reset everything. They'll forgive a lot of loans and things like that. Certainly in America, maybe to some degree in Australia, maybe not quite as much. So certainly, though, we're heading for major change, and you certainly want to make sure that you're being safety, you're being wise and being like a squirrel and kind of looking after yourself. So that's my prediction. I think it's going to be the beginning of what I call of a decline. That's how I see the next 3 or 4 years. I think you'll see good times and you'll see bad times. And overall, the declines will be greater than the good times in terms of economically as a general thing. There'll be less people who'll become more richer. So there'll be smaller groups of people who'll be quite wealthy and doing very well, large groups of people really struggling. And that is why I really encourage people who are getting financially wealthy to do philanthropy, because if every citizen who grows their wealth in his time gives back to the population and tries to find a way to help society, but those who help themselves, rather than sees it as an opportunity to profit for yourself only and profit at people suffering, I think that's half the reason. I think throughout history, we just do that. We go, oh, great. And then, of course, we justify it and say, things, but ultimately profiting from people's suffering eventually falls back on you. Just look at South Africa. Many of them did it. And then, of course, eventually they get angry and fight back. Now, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm just saying, by all means, never be apologetic for using your labours to build good wealth and get highly prosperous. Just make sure that as you're doing that, especially as you're minimising your taxes, you're giving back, in whatever way works for you. You may, you won't necessarily, very few will be like me, thank God, but there'll be some of you who might just think, maybe I've got some amazing wealthy clients who do women's empowerment, and who do events to fund and help stop sex trafficking and really help empower more women. There's some very, very, very good stuff. Then there's people who are setting up, like one of my clients and friends is setting up an amazing health for mental health and to give young people hope and get through this time. And he's doing an amazing job. So many people that I'm meeting, one of my clients was a very, very wealthy Sydney landlord, owned about 40 properties. The guy was a hero. He went to all of his tenants in, basically doing that when they were locked down, they couldn't use it. He said, if any of you are struggling financially because of these lockdowns, let me know and I'll waive your rent for whatever period this goes on. If you can't pay your rent, please don't use this as an opportunity to take advantage of me. He said, but if you really are in hardship because of this, talk to me, I'll help you out. And he did do that, and that's why I was very proud to work with this guy. And in fact, Albanese himself, I'll give him credit for one thing. The guy owns a lot of rental properties, and people who his tenants said he was amazing. He insisted on, without them asking, dropping their rents and helping them through it. And he's well known for being a very fair landlord. So there's things you can do like that. You can really take advantage, buy up properties and get wealthy, buy as they drop and buy into the markets and take it. But then always, this is why the tithe in ancient times was such a good principle. Putting some of your wealth to help others. I promote, spiritual teaching and help the less fortunate. That's my biggest thing I would encourage people in 2023. There's going to be many opportunities this year because things will melt down, but see it as an opportunity for you to also give back and like yourself a whole lot more. I hope that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I think that's really good because especially when recessions, the biggest changes we'll notice is that philanthropists will rise up. That'll probably be one of the biggest things, whereas I think you've mentioned it before, opportunists who kind of seek to take advantage of people always go down in recessions because that's what you're remembered for. When you take advantage of people who are struggling, you're just remembered for that. Whereas people who are genuinely giving back to people who are suffering and struggling to get by, you always remember that even after the recession goes on, because it's always in the most painful times that what you do then is what you'll be remembered for.
I remember for me, you remember, Ed, like about 2 years ago when things got really bad in the lockdowns, and I can actually remember coming up with this, I can actually remember when they were locking down the states and masking everyone up, and I knew that I could have charged a whole lot of money, made a whole lot of money, and I actually remember it was amazing. It was an amazing turning point for me because I remember sitting down with you guys and. You'd remember a couple of our marketing advisors said, yeah, you guys can monetize this. I said, no, I'm not going to monetize it. I said, fuck that. I said, people are suffering from this stuff. I said, we've got to help and share our knowledge freely. Then let the universe sort out and take care of us. And I said, it sounds crazy, but I don't give a shit. I'm not going to profit from my country's suffering. And the funny thing was, I think people picked that up because people to this day all say that to me. We had so many people come to us and we got more clients than ever. Our company exploded over the next year and a half. And I look back and it was better than any marketing we could have done, but I did it authentically. You know, I really wanted to do it and help people. And I felt better about it because I grew up in this kind of missionary background. And yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy helping and empowering people. I get a buzz out of it. You know, I don't really like sitting there as some wealthy empire builder who accumulates stuff and that stuff. I like accumulating stuff in foundations and doing good with it. I just, for me, I get a buzz out of it.
So do you see any do you have any major predictions that you see coming this year in terms of events or anything that you should be looking to prepare for? Or do you think it'll be more a gradual thing? So for example, energy, getting a shortage, food markets, probably emptying shelves and all that. Do you see it more being micro events like that, or do you think there'll be any major ones?
The reality is you do have a problem with very large populations, very, very bunched up in cities. I think if you're in a major city right now in many places, especially if we start seeing blackouts, we're a very vulnerable society. We rely on these centralized grids. And we saw in COVID that when supply chain breaks down, people stop getting cars, they stop getting this, they even stop getting toilet paper, all kinds of things actually break down. Imagine that happening on a bigger scale. Imagine a blackout for days, you know, because the grid gets hacked, because they're getting more digitized and automated. Imagine just farmers can't get their stuff out as much. Imagine governments have shut farms down in some parts of biosecurity, things like that. You know, imagine climate change lockdown because they're concerned about their net zero targets. Imagining all these little factors together bunching up. I do think we're going to see things like that. I hate to say it. I think we are going to, in parts of the world, see food shortages on supermarkets and certain products. I think supply chain and getting stuff is going to get difficult with some things. I think that in some parts of the world, diesel fuel shortages. And for me, you've got to have a whole big picture approach to this. So for me, as you know, I approach it practically. I've chosen a state to live in that I know I live very close to country. I can go to farms. I've got lots of clients who are farms and part of communities. So at a moment's notice, I can jump on my car and go, and I've got clients with big gardens everywhere. I do a lot of consciousness work based on these projects with Master Raymond Grace, who's had amazing work worldwide on raising the consciousness of cities and really seeing our state. And as some of you know, I've been doing this work to see West Australia, where I live, you know, prosperous and abundant with food and energy. And I've even said that to people, you watch, our state will be abundant in energy no matter what. And it was announced that we're the only state that has a surplus of energy right now, you know, and a surplus of food. So there's stuff you can do like that in the way you think about things. There's, like I said, definitely practical things and choosing where you're going to live. And yeah, look, things like that. So I do think we're going to get some challenges, and there's certain parts of Australia I would not want to be living right now. Certain cities, which will remain nameless, but I don't think it's hard to guess based on what happened in COVID. There's a few cities I would not want to be living in. If I was in those states, I would be living in the country or considering moving. There's a few places in the world. I think you and I are in agreement, Ed. We love traveling to America, but we don't want to go there right now. We're very wary of that right now. I think they've got a lot of problems over there. If we went there, it would be a very specific thing, in and out. So yeah, look, I think the world's going to have some big problems. I really do. And I think you just got to be getting on with your life. And I do think we're going to have some pretty fucking big problems, excuse the French.
Yeah, no surprise there. So a lot of things to prepare for. And lastly, with your predictions, what are you predicting for the financial markets? Because you mentioned you think there'll be a few downturns, but did you want to elaborate on that?
Financial markets are very hard to predict. As a rule, I find some people do it easily. I'm good on certain levels, but human behavior is very unpredictable when it comes to money. And the big unknown is just how much more money can governments keep printing and get away with it. And it could be, honestly, this has gone on longer than I thought. I thought we would have collapsed a long time ago. I didn't think we'd get this far. Even Porter Staintree reckoned 2020, and he was conservative like me, you'd start to see the big meltdown. So it's been amazing how long governments have been able to get away with printing money and not kind of eventually causing hyperinflation. It's been amazing. It's blown my mind. So I think I do think we'll definitely see market challenges. I do think eventually, just purely on how resets and markets work and the laws of money and the laws of how the fractional banking system works, this thing is going to collapse. The money system's going to have some pretty major collapses. will it all happen fast? Possibly. More likely than not over about 3 or 4 years. But it's very possible it could happen fast if all these factors and these trends converge together, like a renewable energy net zero push, blackouts happening at the same time, supply chains breaking down, more money printing to get them out of trouble. I'm sure Mr. Biden would do that, although he's going to have a bit more problems now with the House controlled by Republicans. But yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, look, I think any time for the next 1 to 4 years, I'm expecting a fairly major kind of meltdown of some kind, or else a gradual meltdown in 4 or 5 years from now. I'll be sitting and going, shit, can you believe what happened, kind of thing. A bit like COVID.
Yeah, definitely. And what about you, Connor? Because I know you pretty much spend your whole break researching into the financial markets and a lot of predictions. So it would be good to get your insight from what you've been researching. So and predictions that you've been seeing from various people that you've been looking into.
Yeah, I'm in quite a lot of agreement with Warren on everything he said. I think if we didn't have these wider factors looming with kind of energy shortages, and it's not so much just the energy shortages, it's going to be the flow-on effect from that. Like, if you just think about, like Warren was saying, if there's a diesel shortage, if oil continues to skyrocket in price, it's going to have a direct effect on farmers, which are already stretched thin with inflation. And then that kind of snowball effect is going to end up, either getting farms closing down, which you're already seeing in the Netherlands right now. Ed, you talked about that with Stephen. And once it gets to that where there's no energy, there's a lack of food, you're going to start to see a bit of civil unrest as well. And I think those reasons are what have people a little bit more hesitant and a bit more nervous about the market as a whole. If we didn't have those kind of things brewing, to be honest, I probably wouldn't be as worried. And a lot of the people that I kind of follow wouldn't be as worried as well. And they kind of think that the Fed's kind of seeming to have inflation under a little bit of control right now. But everyone is really worried about what's going to happen with kind of the energy push that's happening right now. Because ultimately, if we start to see a bit of civil unrest and things get worse in those, it really doesn't matter what's happening with money supply and things like that. The markets are going to start to crash anyway. So I'm hoping it doesn't get that bad. But, if we're going to keep pushing for these zero emission farms, not using fossil fuels and things like that, we're going to have a bit of back push with the markets in some form. And I do think things will get pretty ugly if that is the case.
It's not going to be, it'll be interesting this year seeing where things go, and there will definitely be a lot to prepare for. So with that in mind, then this is especially for you, Warren, but if you want to jump in, Connor, feel free. But if you had to nail it down to 3 things that you would be doing this year to prepare for what you are predicting, like for these energy shortages, food shortages, and all of these different crises that are on the loom, what would you be doing yourself if you had to name it down to the 3 most important things?
You mean for finances or for everything?
Just generally, like including finances, your health, and just everything in general to become sovereign. What would be the 3 things you'd be focusing on?
Yeah, look, I'm a big believer, as you know, in sovereignty in all areas of life. And look, health is wealth, for example. So my number one thing is my health and my mindset and consciousness. Because if I can keep that good, years ago, I was in a job making a lot of money and I was miserable. A few years later, I had no money and I was happy as Larry because I was doing what I loved doing. I had no money for about a year, but I was a happy man. So number one, I want to be happy, in good health, doing what I like doing. That's my number one thing. And if I had to choose that and nothing else, and it's like I told a client yesterday, I said, if someone offered me I know I'm a billionaire, I know I'm one of the richest men in the world, probably the richest man, because if someone offered me if Elon Musk offered me 100 billion in exchange for me to upgrade all my consciousness, all my everything that I learned, all my health gains, everything that I had, and I had to go back to bare basics, that was the price I would pay, I would say no fucking way, So for me, number one is I'd be looking after that. That's why I do lots of stuff around my health. I do daily training and exercise. I do dancing. I do stuff I like doing. Number two, I would definitely be, if I didn't have this already, empowering myself with the common law and legal rights. I've already done that myself and I put a lot of time into that, but if I hadn't, I would be doing that. So I'd probably count that more as number one. So if you haven't done that, that's all part of that. Number two, definitely getting your finances in order and things like that. So, and really, really making sure that your income's going to be sustainable and it's going to make a lot of money, and that the money will last through recession and that your wealth is well protected. So definitely on your money, number one. Number two, the other one I mentioned before was about the mindset and the kind of spirituality and having those kind of foundations and that. And number three, look, just doing stuff you enjoy and family and making sure you got part of a good community and support network around you, especially for food, for way of life. So look, most of my time has been and about doing that and serving, giving back, being part of the community and stuff like that. So in terms of getting finances in order, when Pete says that, well, look, I mean, as you know, in our business, we did a very strict audit on our company. We've cut any expenses that we don't need for anything we don't think is giving us what we're looking for. We're cutting our expenses down. We're spending money on other things that we know is important for us. So we're really slashing our expenses and, things like that. Really went over our products. Are our products still going to be valid in a recession or are they not? Some of them we knew were, some of them we knew wouldn't be. So we changed it and things like that. So, and making sure all our wealth is well protected, locked up in good structures and things like that. Well, frugal, look, I mean, it's kind of like spending money on being efficient is a better word. I don't like frugal because often you think of tightening up. I think more being efficient. There's some things I'm spending more money on now than I did before. Many of these other things that were just pure wasted luxuries I don't really need. So more efficiency with your money, better efficiency, better value for money.
Yeah, and I like what you said about common law rights and just mindset and empowerment in general, because you can spend all this time building up a good lifestyle and building up a solid income from a job or a career. But then when a recession comes, you can just suddenly lose that and then you've got nothing left over and you're starting again. So when it comes to your rights and also your freedom and your mindset, that sticks with you till the day you die. So that sticks with you. Knowledge doesn't leave you unless you obviously go paralyzed or something like that, but knowledge doesn't leave you. So that's why I think knowledge, health, and community is such important things, and obviously finances too. Those are all key parts of empowerment.
Yep.
So anything that you have to add there, Connor, before we move on?
Yeah, I'd probably just encourage people to keep in mind that even though things might not sound like they're going to go great, there's always going to be opportunity out of those situations as well. So for me personally, preparing, I'm looking at what the world is actually going to need moving forward. So, we just talked about energy and the issues that are going to stem from that. So if that's the case and those things are going to happen, how can you position yourself either with investments or in the markets to actually profit from those types of situations? So I'd encourage everyone just to kind of open their eyes and have a look at where we're actually heading, because if you're able to assess where we're heading and what does well during those types of periods, then even though 2023 may be a bad period for general markets, people find that you can generally outperform the markets. And there are certain assets within the energy sector right now which are in steady uptrends, and they have been for a few years, despite all the markets going down. So I just encourage people to keep open-minded and always look for the things that are going to perform well during these next couple of years.
Yeah. And before we take questions from everyone, so while we're speaking, guys, just put your questions in the Q&A box, because then, if you guys want to get your Warren's take or anyone's take on a certain topic for this year, if you want to get any guidance or any tips on certain things, just put in the Q&A box and we'll get to that afterwards. But I'm interested to hear your take, Warren. Any big takes or hot takes this year that you think will come out? So yesterday on the economy update, Stephen announced he's predicting that Elon Musk will announce his run for US presidency. So that's his big hot take. So we'll be cheering for Stephen that he gets that come through and keeping an eye on the news to see if he's on point. But do you have any big hot takes that you'll take for this year? Any major events you see happening?
Gosh, that's a hard one. Look, Russia, Ukraine, I think definitely watch that space. I think there's going to be stuff happening there. I think wars and more of it. I think this year, a lot of wars and loss. That's what I think, wars and loss. Definitely a lot of loss happening this year. I think definitely a good year to get your priorities in line. Even astrologically, they'll tell you that a 7-year is a good year to get your priorities right, move beyond money, materialism, and have meaning in your life. Interestingly too, there's predictive experts like Martin Armstrong and astrologers, and what they're all uniformly saying is revolution. They talk a lot about revolution over the next few years. So I'm predicting more revolution. I think a lot more people won't comply in certain parts of the world. I do think you'll see a level of awakening at that point. I've seen more pushbacks and protests and awakening and stuff. I think you'll see that happening. I think you'll find, like, even Thailand, they tried to bring in vaccine mandates again. And they quickly dropped them because of the pushback they actually got. I do think markets will, so I think you'll see more pushback from people, but I do think you're going to see more economic chaos. And that's going to be the challenge. I think people are more empowered and they wouldn't get away with some of the stuff they got away with in the last 2 years. But I do think the danger is that, like, especially they're talking about a G20 passport coming in for health and things like that, digital IDs. I think you're going to see more of that. I think more erosion of rights, and they'll escalate that up as people start to push back a little bit more. My big prediction is more people will push back a little bit more. As they see that, they'll speed things up and you'll see more control mechanisms come in. So you really want to be sovereign.
Yeah, definitely. So Aiden says Elon Musk is unable to run for president of the US. So yeah, if that's the case, then Stevens looks like his prediction's already out the door. Yeah. So yeah, what we'll do now is we mentioned about the common law course. So this is actually going to be our first course of the year that we're going to be running. And it came from a lot of popular demand, especially after that whole director's ID situation and even 2021. So do you want to quickly explain why you decided to do it and what it's involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, years and years ago, when I first started getting into sovereignty myself, I was a government worker. I was working at the tax office. I could see things happening. I was a lawyer. I felt miserable. My health was playing up. I'd been bullied as a kid. And I can remember starting my whole journey and ending up doing this common law course, which I paid for it. And in fact, my whole email that we're sending out, I laugh because you'll get to hear me sing. If you read the email, I've actually deliberately put a song on there, but the song that was our mantra for the course that I did was, "A child who knows their common law rights shall do well in life." I've got to sing it for you now. "A child who knows their common law rights shall do well in life. A child who doesn't know their common law rights, they are vulnerable to addiction, coercion, divorce, suicide." And you think about it, that's exactly what happened in 2020. And we learnt this. And I can remember the stuff I learnt in that course changed my life forever. It was the reason I got through the vaccine mandates without being vaccinated with exemptions. It's how I managed to avoid having to wear masks, how I managed to be the only person at the Bursville Casino on that night who walked around without a mask. They took special photos of me, sent them to all the staff to let them know not to harass me because I was an exempted person from all mandates. Now, how did I do that? I didn't do the census for 25 years. I got voting fines once and I wrote one letter and didn't see it again. I stopped bullying twice in my kid's school career within 24 hours with one meeting and one statement legally. That's all I had to say. I never had to spend money with lawyers chasing debts because I knew how to do it myself by having knowing that. I helped many clients at one stage who went through a stage when clients who had credit card debts were being chased for them. I would represent them on behalf of the banks as a lawyer, speak to the banks, and I get their credit card debts cut in half, even more. And I would make a deal with them. If I can cut your debt in half, will you pay me X? They'd say, yeah, win-win. And I was actually making a bit of cash at one stage doing that, negotiating debts, representing clients on audits, stopping disabled people being taken advantage of in business by just simply knowing what to say. I can remember when Grace, my ex-wife and business partner now, but she bought a bed and got basically badly treated by this company. They messed her around so badly. And in the end, she says to me, "Can you do something?" I said, "Yeah, me and Mihal, who's one of our lawyers, will sort this out." And in 2 days, we had the girl actually crying on the phone, asking us why we were so cruel. And we said, "Well, do what you're meant to do and do what your contract says, and we'll back off you." And so we got everything back that we asked, And I've realized that people in those mandates and just everything, not just the mandates, but in relationships, people get in abusive relationships they don't like. They have friends and family do stuff to them. They end up doing sentences they don't want to do, or they're doing it and just don't know their basic legal rights. So what I've done is I've come up with this really, stop bullying in schools within 24 hours, that's what they asked, within 24 hours, just using legal notices, put notices on councils and things like that. So all about absolute empowerment and things like that, especially with women, against bullying, which is my pet hate, having gone through bullying in school. So just quickly, what I will show you is I'll just share my screen with you. But yeah, so this is going to be the curriculum. I'm very excited. I'm deliberately going to make this very affordable. Like I told the team, we're making this 2 options. One is that people who just want to do the online course, it's going to be very, very low cost, you know, compared to what normally these things charge. In fact, I'm charging the same price I was charged, and I'm doing twice as much content and twice as many weeks as what I did. So the same price as I was charged 19 years ago when I did it, you know, which was $250. So basically that's the early bird price. Then there's a bit more for those who want to come to the 2-day workshop we're going to be running, where I'll actually include that for those who want to pay a bit extra. Then, and then we obviously got to cover the cost of the room and things like that. More about, I'd rather get a lot more people empowered, charge a bit less, and, you know, make a difference. So you've got this here. So really teaching the truth about the common law, the straw man, civil and admiralty. Many have heard about that. What's the truth about that? You know, the private realm, the public. From a lawyer's perspective, I'll give you the balanced full perspective. You know, lawful versus legal, especially one of my favorite. Like it may have been legal to coerce people in the vaccines, but it wasn't lawful. It may be legal for one stage when China passed a law that you can only have 1 child, but not necessarily lawful. It may be legal to take 80% tax, but it's not lawful. So really learning about that and things like that. So then, of course, government statutes, mandates, what they actually are, because there's all kinds of myths about them and what is about this is not lawful. But there's some things that governments did in the pandemic that were lawful and were legal. And that's what bothered me. They were actually legal. And people are saying that's not lawful. And I remember sitting there thinking, but the problem is it actually is. And they got away with this because the state of emergency, I noticed the incredible ignorance on what that actually was. And once they declared that, I knew we were in real trouble because I knew that legally they implemented Blackstone's martial law state of emergency regime, which was what Blackstone said, woe to a nation that does that in a time of peace to manipulate their people. And so I knew that they'd implemented some ancient common law, the state of emergency, and they basically had the country by the balls. And when they declare state of emergencies, you have a real problem because they are legal. They actually are. Then we went into the legal notices about why the pen is mightier than the sword. In other words, if you have an issue, the best thing you can do is put it in writing. There's nothing more powerful than a debt collector who's harassing you, and you just put a simple notice upon them, spelling it out and saying it shall be taken unless we hear from you in 7 days that, and you spell a consequence, and it's incredible how quickly they start behaving a lot better with you, you know, and things like actually that. So things like that. You then got the government mandates, personal fines and things like that, bullying and harassment and things like that. Like you're going to be doing that's week 6, personal fines. So basically that. And so you basically got personal fines, like how do you deal with speeding, parking, voting, census, just little tips about that, the truth and what's not the truth, things that you can do. And there's some things you'll be told, there's not a lot you can do, but there's other things you can do. Local councils, how to deal with them and their ordinances and things with that. And then what you would do with local councils, private regulatory boards, and dealing with those kind of stuff, personal debts and stuff like that, business debts, no debt collectors, privacy going dark, practical workshop and conclusion and things like that. So, and yeah, so what we're doing as well, and there's some people who are already members, if you're a member, you'll be able to get this 50% off, you know. I am only charging because of the fact that this particular course, like I said, it's really, like I said, we're going to use a lot of our money to fund a lot of the kind of stuff that we're doing to awaken people. So that's why I thought about it. So yeah, basically, you know, we're just encouraging, you know, members who are already paid and who are whatever else, just to do, we'll give a special discount on this particular one, but this one's a special course. You're going to be getting a lot of really good stuff on this particular course. So, and things like that. So in terms of the course, the Zoom, the 2-day workshop will be live and we'll probably be in Perth. That's the thing. But keep in mind, like I said, there's going to be 2 different offers. One will just be the very basic price for the starting, and then there is going to be the you know, the price for those of you who want to come to a live workshop as well. And we're just giving you a bit of an early bird peek. We haven't actually officially launched it yet, but Edward said you want to announce it tonight. But yeah, so who's interested in principle? Like I said, you will walk away really empowered. And even if you don't come to the 2-day workshop, You will walk away with full empowerment. You watch the videos anytime. The 2 days just to more sit down together in a room and practice doing a lot of notices and things like that, and real life, that kind of stuff. Doing it in real life, so you can really get the benefit of everything that I've taught or whatever else.
Well, yeah, and I think like for me personally, when it comes to the common law, this course especially, then there's no better way to start the year than doing something like this. And I don't say that lightly, just because with all the stuff that's going to happen and stuff that we've already seen happening, like the director's ID, COVID, last 2 years, we've seen a lot of things, an invasion of privacy and stuff like that. And somehow I don't think a magic bullet or a magic, like something, it's just not going to change. Like it'll keep happening until people actually wake up and realize that it comes back to personal empowerment. So this is something that everyone should be doing. I'm sure you can agree with that, Warren, because there's no better way to start the new year than actually learning to empower yourself, because when you empower yourself, then you can take that knowledge and be able to share it with others, and then they'll notice the changes, they'll want to do something similar, and then eventually over time you will get a population and people that will be able to stand up and be able to protect themselves for what's coming ahead. So that's what I'll say about it.
Yeah, actually, I'll just realised I'll put up the actual page for it so you can see that as well. There's a special, here we are. So yeah, we've got this special page here or whatever else, and things like that. And for those who want the early bird discount, like I said, that's for basically doing this over the next couple of weeks. There's a much lower price, so to speak, which is, I'll put the code in here. But yeah, this is basically the course, so this is the link if you're interested in doing this. And yeah, like I said, I'm very excited, and we really want this word to get out. Tell your friends about it, whatever else. The idea is to really empower people and come along and, like I said, give it the absolute best. So it'll be everything. The idea is to save you a lot of money from going to lawyers, doctors and everything else, and know how to deal with it. So practical tips around dealing with any kind of bullying or harassment. And it happens all the time, whether it's a government mandate, it's police, it's a credit card company notice, it's a call from a debt collector, it's people refusing to pay you in businesses earn money. Honestly, this, like I said, this training in 19 years ago that I did, paid $250 19 years ago, got a 7-week course. And this one you're getting 13 weeks. And I'm actually charging exactly the same price that I was charged 19 years ago. And yet they'll certainly be recorded. So the recordings will be available. So if you happen to miss that particular meeting or whatever else, the 2-day workshop will not be recorded, but the the 2-day workshop will not be recorded, but of course the 13-week will be recorded. The 2-day workshop is going to be hands-on, doing notices in real time and stuff like that. Margaret's incredible price. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Sandra was asking, the online cost the same cost. No, the actual course is, we're gonna have we finalized that one, Ed, yet for the actual the 13 weeks is $250. That's for that. To come to the actual event, it's going to cost more.
The 250 one is the early bird price for the course. That's going to end on Australia Day, which is January 26th, and then it'll go back to $497 for the normal price. And then the 2-day workshop, we're still organising that and finalising logistics for it.
Yeah, so we'll probably charge about $997 for that, only because we'll need 2 days. We want to hire a decent room. We want to put on food for people and all that kind of stuff. And I'm less concerned about making profit, but at the same time, I certainly don't want us to be able to cost if we do that 2-day workshop. Otherwise, we just won't do it. We'll stick to the to this one and just do something small for people in Perth. So my preference is definitely to do this, like I said. So we're definitely doing the 13-week one, and at this stage, we're going to be doing the 2-day workshop if there's enough people. At this stage, we'll probably be looking at $997, which would also include the $250, and that will include coming to the event for 2 days, getting meals provided, everything like that. A lunch, possibly a dinner, things like that. So now we haven't got the discount code for existing members, have we?
No, but just send us an email and we'll sort it out from there.
Send us an email, yeah, we'll sort it out.
So send us, for members, just send us an email and we'll sort it out for you. So support@globalwealthclub.com.
Yeah.
Mark asked, does this law apply in New Zealand?
Common law applies everywhere. I mean, obviously there'll be some parts, but 90% of it will apply in every Western country. So yeah, next event we will have the codes and that more ready. We're literally, this was off the cuff in the moment where we decided to let everyone know about the event, and so we've still got a couple of things to finalize, but by next week we'll be sending it out, and we'll watch the space for the email. We'll be sending it out to you.
Yeah, and we'll be doing more webinars on this, and a lot more emails will come through just sharing more information about it. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And yeah, if this is something that you're looking to do, then I say this is a great way to start the year, just because empowering yourself, there's nothing better than that. I'm sure we can all agree, especially in times like this. So yeah, if you're interested,
who's going to be coming? Yeah, just out of interest, just on the chat, a few of you have already mentioned me privately, but who's planning to come to this? Just out of curiosity. Awesome. Yep, getting a few messages. Excellent. Yeah, no, you'll love this. This is an absolute no-brainer, I'm telling you. Yeah, I want to do a lot more of this kind of stuff, and definitely, yeah, like I said, the main thing we want to do more of this kind of stuff as well, and just eventually use it as a way of philanthropy and funding more philanthropy. That's one of my aims to this as well. So as I see it, the best way we're going to change our society is empowering people. Imagine if Australians and US and New Zealand were empowered. I mean, governments would never get away with this shit again. So, deliberately keeping the price extremely ridiculously affordable. And I'm banking on the fact that, there'll be lots of people sign up for it. And if they don't, and things like that. And yeah, please share it with your friends, let them know that kind of stuff. We'll be doing some webinars in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, this is going to be the best kick-ass self-empowerment course ever done that I can think of, because I'm taking all the stuff I've learned in underground movements, what I've learned from different people, what I've learned from this course I did before, and bringing in my own experience as a lawyer and my own experience in taking on and winning cases and doing stuff like that. I'll even show you, in fact, at one stage I got so good about it, the government actually had to visit me, and I got a visit from a top police telling me they're going to make sure I didn't win any more cases because we're making it too difficult. And actually at one stage, for a bit of fun, I was going out winning speeding fine cases, but taking all kinds of, basically finding ways to challenge infringement notices and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, you can find it if you search me up online on that one as well, in terms of speeding fine cases and things like that. And yeah, so look, there's plenty. When you learn this stuff, I don't do that kind of stuff as much now, but it saved my life in the whole pandemic, and it certainly helped me in knowing how to set myself up, even now, for what's coming ahead. I knew what to say when the census lady came around my door. And yeah, and if you're having a friend who's being bullied in the workplace, you'll know how to help her out or do it yourself. If you're getting bullied, it'll be fun. So I'm looking forward to see some of you there.
I think only you would be putting a news article about winning over a speeding ticket, but everyone, you said it yourself, it's going to be the best self-empowerment course out there, going to be the biggest kick-ass. So people will have to come out and find for yourself if you think we all know you can live up to that statement. So you'll have to
That speeding fine case was hysterical, because I actually went in there to see what happened, and I argued that they had no jurisdiction to give me a speeding fine in Queensland, because I said, because the way the speeding fine ticket read was Sergeant such and such versus Warren Black, because that's the way they're issuing them. I said, but hang on a sec, does this guy own the roads? So unless this guy owns the roads, unless the government own the roads, which they can't, it's owned by the Crown and sovereign people, you can't give me a fine because it's a commercial ticket. And I said, in any event, I don't live in Queensland. And the magistrate pissed himself laughing, and he ended up, I think, enjoying taking the mickey out of the cops, out of the whole thing. And I just brought out all these arguments, and I won the case, and it was hysterical, and I found these technicalities, and I was getting out of all kinds of stuff. And I did, though, learn some lessons from that. I went a bit too far and became a bit of a cocky little shit. And I remember the Legal Practice Board eventually came after me, because I was still a lawyer at the time. I spent 2.5 years fighting a misconduct or just not misconduct, just unprofessional. And in the end, they just kind of said, look, we're fine. I just got a minor reprimand, and they said, look, we don't really have an issue, but just, you know, if you're really a lawyer, you shouldn't be running around doing this kind of stuff. And I said, fair enough. And I resigned being a lawyer, and I went out and became private. So, yeah, it was pretty fun, you know, pretty fun. And yeah, the system is very crushing if you don't know your rights. And man, if I only knew it, like when I can remember when, any kind of bullying that's gone on. And the good thing is you can do a lot of good service. Like one of my neighbours, her son was getting badly bullied in school, and she's very distressed by it. And I said, don't leave it to me, I'll go to the school. And I just went to school, had a chat with the principal. Within 5 minutes, those bullies were raked under the coals and the whole thing was sorted. So, oh yeah, you can make the world a better place and make your finances a lot richer and things like that.
Yeah, like when those cops paid you a visit and all that, I'm sure you didn't do anything to deserve it. So, but yeah, we'll let you have it.
They're very, very nice about it. The cops were actually quite nice. They actually said, look, we're really sorry. You know, I said, you actually like shaking me down and telling me that, you know, I'm, they said, look, they said, well, what we're kind of saying is, yeah, we're certainly not going to make it easy for you to win cases because, you know, we don't want people just bucking the system. We want them to just pay speeding fines and do what they're told. I'm like, okay. And yeah, after that, I found it impossible to win anything. So that was the end of my little journey.
I mean, another big reason too for me why I believe this is a really big topic too is because for me personally, I know that I hate feeling small and feeling helpless, like you can't do anything. That's a big thing for me. Like I obviously haven't been, I haven't been bullied before, anything like that. So it's a bit different for me. Some people feel like they're being bullied. That's why they want to learn common law. Some people feel a different emotion, but I know for me, I hate feeling small and feeling like I can't do anything about something. So that's why for me, something like this is going to be important, especially for where times are going. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, whether you get more threatened, whether you like feel small and like the governments are the big ones or something like that. But really taking back your power is going to be such a big part of 2023 and further.
Yeah, like who felt very disempowered with the whole thing? I'm just curious, like who felt like really, 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 really disempowered with the whole crap that went on? There would have been a few of you, yeah. At times I did. I felt really frustrated, you know?
Well, yeah, it's even if it's deep emotions, you do feel certain things, whether you're conscious of it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's excellent. Okay.
All right. Well, did you have any final comments you wanted to make to everyone before we finish things off?
No, look, just thanks for coming, everyone, and let's go out and, you know, hopefully, you know, yeah, make the world a much better place is really what I'd be saying, you know, so. And yeah, look, thanks for all your support and look forward to keep seeing you come along.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it went a bit longer than we thought, but I think it went really well. Was a really good discussion tonight. Really came back this year, 2023, with a great session tonight, I thought. So really good to hear your predictions. It was great to see all of your engagement for those that were listening and tuning in. It was great to see your comments come through and all that and feedback. And yeah, if you guys have any questions come through, just feel free to email them to support@globalwealthclub.com. Make sure you share this with your friends because this is such an important topic. And I think we're all in agreement on that empowering yourself is such a big topic for this year, not even just this year, but for times coming forward. So it's important for yourself, but also for your friends and family. More people that can get empowered, then the more likely we can of getting Australia back. And obviously that'll be a big thing to say, but I think it's really achievable if people just band together and take the right steps. So thanks again, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you guys in our next sessions, and keep an eye on your emails because more information will be coming soon. So we'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks everyone.
To kick the habit that my mind is